2011. What a year for TV. Coming off the first seasons of The Walking Dead, Pretty Little Liars, Luther, Gossip Girl was about to start its final season, Game of Thrones was premiering, New Girl was premiering, Black Mirror, Suits, Shameless, Two Broke Girls, but that one sucks, nobody cares. And in the midst of all of that, with all the supernatural teen mania that was happening with Twilight, Vampire Diaries, and all that shit, MTV decided to capitalize on the trend and released Teen Wolf. Now, for the like 7 of you that don't know, Teen Wolf is actually a very loose adaptation of a 1985 movie of the same name starring Michael J. Fox. The original film was kind of a cheeky comedy about a high school kid named Scott who turns into a werewolf and uses his newfound abilities to dunk on people at basketball. It's really campy and very much a product of the 80s, and I think that's why a lot of people were confused by the idea of a TV adaptation. The movie doesn't really have the type of plot that you can widely rework into a longer format, so in order to work, they had to completely reinvent the concept. And they did. Now today, Teen Wolf is considered a modern classic of teen dramas, but when it started airing in 2011, it went largely unnoticed. It's really in season 2 that the show started picking up a real audience, and it ended up running for 6 years. I used to watch this show when it was airing, and I watched till the end, and I knew one day I would probably revisit it for a video, but now seems like a perfect time because 4 years after going off the air at the close of its 6th season, it was announced that Teen Wolf will be coming back in 2022 with a movie. It's apparently set to be a direct sequel to the show from the original showrunner Jeff Davis, and fans are really excited about it. I was kind of pumped to go back to the show because I loved the characters, but I actually didn't remember much from the story, so there's a lot of it that I had to experience all over again. Now, if you don't know, on my Instagram stories, I often do a tag where I ask people to tell me their unpopular opinions. And a few months ago, someone said they think Teen Wolf is the best supernatural teen show ever made. The reaction was split. A lot of people agreed and a lot of people disagreed, and I received an army of messages asking me what I think of Teen Wolf. So yeah, what do I think of Teen Wolf? Well, I think Teen Wolf is fucking hilarious. This show is so corny. It is so out there. It's so fucking stupid. There are so many elements of this show that do not work, but you know what? I don't care. I love it. Whenever I think of good, bad TV, Teen Wolf always crosses my mind. This show is just so dumb and brainless, and the plot makes no sense. Not kidding, 95% of this show is completely incoherent. The writing is fucking hilarious, and sometimes it just looks so mediocre that I can't help but laugh. Look at this shit. Look at it. It fucking sucks. I love it. And I love it because despite all of its flaws, there's just something about Teen Wolf that is so uniquely charming that I can't bring myself to hate it. It has a spark to it that makes it really endearing, and it just feels cozy. It's the perfect example of good trash. It sucks, but it's charming. For one, this show has no idea how to do anything in moderation. Everything is always at 180%. It is constantly in a state of excess, and it's hilarious. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I had so much fun rewatching it because I was just perpetually reminded of how dumb it is. And it's not even to say that Teen Wolf is all bad. No, this show has its moments, and it has elements that are genuinely great. And we're gonna talk about that more, but as a whole, as a completed series, yeah, let's not fool ourselves here, this is fucking mid.
Where is she? Where's the girl?
But it's also a show with a very unique sense of charisma, and it sort of has its own signature style. Teen Wolf has a very specific identity that really stands out, with a lot of things people will immediately recognize from it, including its fight scenes, stylized visuals, and above all else, this show loves its party sequences. And there are so many party sequences. I know I sound like I'm roasting it, and that's because I am, but I genuinely love Teen Wolf. Like, really. And since I knew I was going to sit down and binge all 6 seasons of the show, I had to cozy myself up. So I got myself a new couch, a new TV, and also I got myself some HelloFresh, the sponsor of today's video. I don't know about you, but I always need to find something good to eat before I start binging something. Like, I won't press play until I have something to eat in my hands. But I'm also the type of person who absolutely hates having to figure out what to eat all the time. And usually I have a bit of a busy schedule that doesn't allow me to look up recipes and take the time to go get the ingredients to cook them. And that's where HelloFresh kind of swoops in to save your life. They make this stuff so easy. Because with HelloFresh, you get the best pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes for amazing meals that are delivered right to your doorstep. It makes home cooking really fun, affordable, and most of all, it just makes it really easy. They offer 50 menu and market items to choose from every week, including vegetarian options, calorie-smart options, and even gourmet options if you're feeling fancy. This week, they sent me 3 different options, and I really want to try this pork tenderloin and root veggie meal because look at it. I'm gonna make that. And while I do, let me just tell you that HelloFresh is offering you guys a pretty sweet deal right now. If you go to HelloFresh.com and use code SPACE14, they're going to offer you 14 free meals. Not 1, not 2, 14. That is free food. 14 times. And you also get 3 free gifts because they're just cool like that. And there's so much to choose from. You know, it's almost December now. The holidays are approaching really fast, and we all know this is a really hectic time. But HelloFresh helps keeping things simple with recipes and ingredients that cut out on grocery shopping and limit meal prep time. And if you're like me and you hardly ever have the time to cook, they also offer a variety of quick and easy recipes for meals that are cooked in under 20 minutes, are easy to clean up, and you barely have to prep anything. And you're wasting less food because everything is already pre-portioned. Oh, and also, did I mention that they're giving you 14 meals for free? And now look at this. Look at it. I made this. Who am I? Gordon Ramsay? No, I'm Friendly Space Ninja, but I could have fooled you. And boy, was this good. I destroyed that meal, and I can't wait to try more of them. So remember, go to HelloFresh.com and use code SPACE14 for 14 free meals and 3 free gifts. All the info is in the description box down below. Thank you, HelloFresh, for sponsoring this video, and thank you for the amazing food mostly. And let's get back to Teen Wolf. So Teen Wolf is the story of Scott McCall, a 16-year-old high school kid living in the fictional town of Beacon Hills in California. One night, Scott and his best friend Stiles, a turbulent kid who likes to put his nose where it's not supposed to be, decide to go into the woods to find a dead body the police is currently looking for. When they get there, Stiles immediately gets caught by his dad, who's the sheriff of the town, and Scott escapes further into the woods. But once he is alone, he finds the body and gets attacked and bitten by a mysterious creature. A creature that may or may not have been supernatural. Blah blah blah, he's turning into a werewolf, you know the drill. Now, like I said a bit earlier, this was my first time rewatching the show since it started airing in 2011, so season 1 was very foggy to me. And I gotta say, the pilot is actually really fun. It's cheesy as hell, and the writing is odd, but it's fun to watch. Sometimes ironically, and sometimes unironically. But mostly ironically. The ironic part just comes from certain characters or certain interactions. For starters, I had completely forgotten how every single character in this show is a genre stereotype cranked up to 11. I didn't remember much from Jackson, given that he leaves the show at the end of season 2, so during my rewatch, I just got to be reminded of how utterly ridiculous this character is.
You ruined it for me. You ruined everything!
Ew, you sound stupid.
The show manages to flesh him out a bit more later on, but god damn it, those early episodes with Jackson are laughable. He is such a bad character. I also forgot how annoying Lydia was in the earlier episodes. I think some of it was on purpose, but her one-dimensional mean girl persona was quite irritating to me. And on the cheesy side, I will point out that every interaction between Scott and Allison in the pilot is fucking hilarious. They are so cheesy.
You have an eyelash on your cheek.
I'm not crying.
Don't you want to punch them in the face? They're so cute, I hate it. However, the thing the pilot does really well is showcasing Scott's transition into a werewolf. For one, I really appreciate that this pilot does not waste any time. It jumps straight into the essentials. The show begins, Scott and Stiles are established as best friends. They head into the woods to find a dead body Stiles heard about on his dad's phone call. Scott finds himself alone in the woods, and by minute 7 he has been bitten by a werewolf. And the rest of the episode is following his transition. It's quick and effective, and it doesn't feel like the show is rushing. And yeah, Scott's transition is really fun to follow. For example, the first time he meets Allison is the first time he realizes he can hear things that are very far away as if they were happening right next to him. From his classroom, he can hear Allison having a conversation on the phone outside in front of the building. And what I really like about this scene is that he hears Allison mention that she forgot to bring a pen on her first day of school. And then when she enters the classroom a minute or two later, he just turns to her without saying a word and hands her a pen. I don't know, I like it. It's cute. There's another scene where Scott goes to work at a veterinarian's office, and when he tries to feed the cats at night, they all just start going crazy and hissing at him because they can feel that something about him is off. And then he eventually turns into a full werewolf during the full moon. He figures out Hale is the one who bit him. He goes to confront him in the woods and start to fight for a minute, but then they have to team up to escape the woods when they're attacked by werewolf hunters. The episode has its resolution, and then we are left with a pretty solid cliffhanger when Scott finds out the next morning at school that the hunter who tried to kill him the night before is Allison's father. Overall, it's a pretty cool pilot. It's cute, it's fun. I don't know, leave me alone. But the rest of the show is a bit of a roller coaster, and I mean that in more ways than one. The thing with Teen Wolf, and probably a huge factor in its eventual downfall, is the fact that it's not very consistent. This show kind of transforms all the time. It tries a lot of different shit, and I think as a result of having such a broken identity, we can kind of separate Teen Wolf in 3 major incarnations. You have Teen Wolf before season 3, Teen Wolf during season 3, and then Teen Wolf after season 3. They are all part of the same entity, but they're like 3 completely different shows. I think you'll get what I mean. Let's get started, shall we? Season 1 and 2. Season 1 as a whole is completely ridiculous and at times hilarious, but it's fun. I can definitely see why the show caught on, especially back in 2011. The writing is super campy, especially the dialogue and its overabundance of sexual innuendos that are usually followed by an awkward pause as the show is like, did you get it? That was a sex joke. Did you get it? It's funny, right? Please say it's funny. And it does it way more often than I remembered.
Maybe you should stop pretending to suck just for his benefit.
Trust me, I do plenty of sucking just for his benefit.
God damn it, G! You got him! You got him!
But in the end, Teen Wolf Season 1, while not groundbreaking or unique in any way, is fairly effective. And the reason why Season 1 is so effective is that Jeff Davis decided to add an element of mystery in it. At its core, Season 1 of Teen Wolf is a whodunit murder mystery, but the killer we're trying to find is a werewolf, more specifically, an alpha. The entire season consists of Scott and his friends trying to figure out the identity of the alpha, and it's generally pretty solid. The season also deals with Scott becoming the target of werewolf hunters, who are these vicious, highly trained assassins who like to hang out in the woods at night and shit. Scott also falls in love with Allison, the new girl in school who really likes him, but he has to hide his secret from her, and it leads her to become suspicious of certain things. It's all very cliche. Honestly, season 1 is mostly bad, but it has its moments, especially towards the end. Allison finding out Scott is a werewolf right after finding out her family members have been werewolf hunters for generations is genuinely emotional. Her entire world is just split in 2 in a matter of seconds, and it kickstarts a genuinely intriguing storyline that carries through season 2, where she struggles to decide who she should be loyal to. The twist of Peter Hale being the alpha still works for me. The backstory is really interesting, and they did a great job at swerving your expectations. And Peter is actually a solid villain in this season. He's this architect type villain. You eventually find out he orchestrated all of the events of the season to work in his favor. And his plan and motivations make perfect sense. Peter is like a one-man army because he's not only very strong, he's also very smart. He doesn't have minions or anything like that, but he's a master tactician and he has a way to manipulate circumstances to put people in a situation where they're forced to do what he wants them to do because they simply don't have a choice. I like Peter a lot as a villain, and it's too bad that they had to bring him back every season after that.
Don't you understand yet? I'm not the bad guy here. You turn into a giant monster with red eyes and fangs, and you're not the bad guy here?
The whole storyline with the hunters develops fairly well too. Despite it being very cheesy, the writers actually do a great job at building some layers into the hunters as villains. For one, there's a real element of perspective. They're clearly the antagonists, but they're not necessarily evil, because from their point of view, werewolves are predators and killers, and they want to get rid of them for survival. They truly believe they are the ones in the front lines to make the world a safer place. They also have a code that comes with certain morals. They don't kill children, they don't kill werewolves who haven't taken innocent lives. They also leave the women to make final decisions in situations of crisis because they believe women have a better ability to preserve peace. Like, they have a whole protocol to operate with their own version of dignity. And while their rules are never fully explained to us, they often use this idea of the code to give the hunters somewhat of a moral compass. I think it's safe to say that while it's not the worst, season 1 is the most forgettable season of the show, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. It's a bad thing because a lot of people get disinterested in season 1 and just stop watching, but it's a good thing because if you do get through season 1, then you've gone through the most boring part of the series. Season 2, in terms of quality, is very much on par with season 1. There are differences though. I feel like season 1 failed in places where season 2 succeeds, but season 2 also fails in places where season 1 succeeded. But overall, it does feel like a consistent continuation to what the show started. And season 2 is also where we finally get the legendary intro sequence of Teen Wolf. Yo, that shit goes too hard. I'm not gonna lie, this intro has no right to be as good as it is. But anyways, season 2 kinda changes the situation of the show in the best ways. Scott has now accepted that being a werewolf is part of his identity, and he truly begins to step forward as the leader of the group. Allison is now fully aware of the supernatural world surrounding her, and she is actively in the process of finding her place in it, for better or for worse. Derek has become the alpha after killing Peter, and he's now building his own pack in very shady ways. Stiles is just still here, being Stiles, and no complaints here, carry on. And Lydia is turning into a Sam Raimi character. This time around, the characters are more used to their world being weird and shit, and they're all starting to figure out what part they have to play in it. The big bad of season 2 is Gerard Argent, Allison's ruthless grandfather and the leader of the werewolf hunters. He comes back to Beacon Hills to get revenge for his daughter Kate, Allison's aunt, who was murdered by the Alpha at the end of season 1, when it was revealed that she broke the code and set fire to the Hale house that killed men, women, children, and people who were not even werewolves. And when he comes back, my man is pissed the fuck off, to the point where he decides that he doesn't care about the code anymore. He comes back in total John Wick mode. No mercy, no prisoners, kill them all. He did not come back to get the werewolf who killed his daughter. He came back to start an extermination of werewolves as a whole. Now on paper, I love that. Gerard is a merciless hunter, a highly intelligent and calculated general. But above all else, he's a grieving father. He is so consumed by the loss of his child that his morals go out the window. His crusade is no longer about the safety of the world. Now, this is just pure revenge. Or at least that's what it should have been. You see, the big problem with Teen Wolf Season 2 is the start of a very long tradition with Teen Wolf that I like to call Terrible Villains. It's a simple name, but it does the job. Gerard is just so boring as a villain because despite all of the depth he could have been given by the loss of Kate that should challenge his morals, he ends up being portrayed as a very generic bad guy who just yells and doesn't have much of a personality. He is somewhat threatening, but super one note and just kind of flat. They try to pull the same thing they did with Peter Hale, where it's sort of revealed that Gerard orchestrated the events of the season to get control of the Kanima, but it's just so weirdly executed, mostly because Gerard's plan doesn't make a lot of sense. Basically, in the finale, we find out that Gerard has cancer and he's dying, and in fact, he wasn't actually in Beacon Hills to avenge his daughter, but his plan was to orchestrate a situation that would force Scott to kill Derek so that Scott would become the alpha and turn him into a werewolf so he could cure his cancer? Which, first of all, what? And second of all, not only is that a complete 180 from his initial motivation to eradicate werewolves, it's also a plan that is way too convoluted for what he's trying to accomplish. He went through all the trouble of faking his grief for his daughter, creating a war between werewolves and hunters, becoming the principal of the high school, manipulating a teenager to control the Kanima, then murdering that teenager to become master of the Kanima, threatening Scott's mother, kidnapping Stiles and Derek's pack, brainwashing Allison into becoming an assassin and turn her against her family and Scott, then tried to get rid of Jackson, forced his son to turn against him for no reason, all of that to get Scott to turn him into a werewolf? No! That's stupid! 95% of this plan was completely unnecessary. Especially because in the finale, he shows with no emotion that he's ready to kill his own son and granddaughter to get to his goal. So all he had to do was tell Scott, hey, turn me into a werewolf or I'll kill Allison. And Scott would have probably done it because Allison is his entire life. Or even better yet, he could have just asked Derek to give him the bite. Derek was already turning sick people into werewolves to save their lives and build his pack. He probably would have just done it. This is the most overly complicated evil plan ever, and it makes Gerard look way less clever than they want you to believe he is. That said, I do like that Gerard is a villain that Scott can't defeat just by punching him really hard. He actually challenges Scott intellectually, and Scott wins by outsmarting him and playing the long game, which is really interesting for his character because that's usually not how Scott operates. But I just wish the villain itself was more compelling to pull off that switcheroo. I don't know. The antagonists this season are very weak. I mean, hell, one of the twists of season 2 is that the secret villain who has been controlling the Kanima to commit murders is a random high school kid who is getting revenge for being bullied when he was 9 years old. It's just, I don't know, man. Get a Kit Kat. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. Teen Wolf is a show with one of the most terrible gallery of villains probably ever. The biggest issue is mostly that the show constantly tries to pull a twist villain, but the writers are not clever enough to set things up in a way that can truly surprise us. Why? Because they always introduce the twist villain in the beginning of the season. Every season, you meet a random new character that seems completely insignificant to the story, but that for some reason is always there. And you're immediately like, oh, a new character with no arc that appears in every single episode of the show for no reason? Wow, I wonder who is going to be the twist villain. Season 2 had the photographer kid that was obviously the one controlling the Kanima. Season 3 had the new teacher who was obviously going to be revealed as the sacrifice demon. Season 4 had this girl who was obviously going to be the benefactor. It's just so predictable. And yeah, Meredith did appear in the season before, but she did not have a big role until season 4 when they needed her to be the villain. However, the season improves the show in a number of ways. Overall, I'd say season 2 is more entertaining to watch than season 1. It feels like the show has finally found its rhythm, and while it's still not great, it flows way more efficiently. I found it much easier to get through this season. Anyways, the first 2 seasons are fine. They're very much an experimentation phase. It's the show trying to find itself. There isn't that much to say about them. You can tell they didn't have their mythology around werewolves on lock yet. Sometimes they just have abilities that are never explained and that we never see again. In season 2, there's an episode where Scott can feel that somebody in the school is about to have a seizure, and he goes to save her before she falls from a climbing wall. That power is never explained, and also it never happens again. Season 1 introduces the idea of werewolves turning into full wolves. We don't know why they can, and also it's never mentioned again, and I'm pretty sure nobody ever turns into a full wolf after season 1. Also, the first 2 seasons do this hilarious thing where the werewolves run on all fours, and it looks so ridiculous. But they stopped doing that, and thank God, because what the fuck. But now that season 2 is out of the way, this is where things get really interesting, because now we are entering the second incarnation of Teen Wolf. Season 3. Now, the shocking thing about Teen Wolf to me is that this show is iconic on many levels, but also, even its biggest fans know that it never really was a great show. Let me explain. Teen Wolf had 6 seasons, which came with a grand total of 100 episodes exactly. But the thing is, only 12 episodes of Teen Wolf are actually good. I'm not kidding. Only 12% of this show is actually worth watching. And I know that fans of Teen Wolf have already guessed what I'm talking about. I am talking about 3B. You see, Jeff Davis was not really big on the idea of Teen Wolf taking the CW model of having over 20 episodes every season. Season 1 and Season 2 had 12 episodes each, but unfortunately, MTV ordered 24 episodes for Season 3 out of nowhere, and the people behind the show, they didn't really vibe with that. It was a big-ass switch from the original formula, and Jeff wasn't down to do that. So instead of making a long-ass 24-episode season, he decided to split Season 3 into 2 mini-seasons of 12 episodes each with their own stories that would simply be called Season 3A and Season 3B. Season 3A premiered on June 3rd, 2013, and it marked a significant transformation for the show. With the sudden departure of a key character in the show and the introduction of many new characters in the cast, Teen Wolf also saw itself completely transformed in terms of tone. Season 1 and Season 2 were like your sweet high school romantic comedy with some fantastical elements and things like the werewolves or the Kanema, but nothing too crazy. However, in Season 3, Jeff Davis suddenly decided to completely transform the DNA of the show, and he just went, yeah, this is a horror show now. And boom, just like that, Season 3 turned Teen Wolf into something else entirely. And honestly, I think Jeff and his team deserve praise here. Changing the tone of a show this drastically is a very difficult thing to pull off, and I don't think Teen Wolf gets the credit it deserves for actually succeeding. Especially because despite the huge gamble, Season 3 ended up being the best season in the entire series. It's almost like Season 3 served as a soft reboot of the show, and while it was jarring for a lot of people, the sudden change in tone was largely welcomed by fans. So let's break it down. Season 3A picks up 4 months after the events of Season 2, and everything is really different. Scott and Allison are no longer together. Scott is struggling to find his happiness without her, but he's managing. Allison, on the other hand, is trying to redefine her life with her father after the death of her mother in the previous season. Lydia is trying to recover from her breakup with Jackson, who moved to London because Colton Haynes left the show. Stiles is just here, being Stiles, and again, no complaints here. And Derek is looking for his spag that was kidnapped at the end of the last season. Season 3A largely expanded on the show's werewolf mythology, mainly with the antagonists of the season being a pack entirely composed of alphas and their leader Deucalion, a sort of Super Saiyan known as the Demon Wolf. Season 3 is the only season with genuinely good villains, and this guy is definitely worth the watch. The one thing that's absolutely amazing with Deucalion is how the writers build the fear around him. Everyone is terrified of that guy, and you see him all the time, but he never really does anything that scary. He's menacing and all, but you can't quite understand why everyone is so scared of him. They make you wait till the finale to finally see him transform into his werewolf incarnation, and holy shit. This is how good build-up works, because the scene when you finally see him transform, before he even starts fighting, you immediately understand how fucked everyone is.
Should we show them why you needed to sacrifice 9 innocent people just to face me? Or is it 12 now?
And honestly, that whole scene is just crazy. It's one of my favorites in the entire show, because you finally get it. You get why ancient supernatural beings went through all that trouble and were ready to sacrifice innocent lives just to have a chance to contain Deucalion, because he is one terrifying motherfucker.
Kill her. Do it.
This woman spent the whole season sacrificing lives to gain more power, and she becomes more powerful than all of the characters in the show, and you wait the whole season to finally see her go one-on-one against Hoechlin, and when it finally happens, Hoechlin destroys her in like 3 seconds. Everything she did was for nothing. And speaking of which, yeah, the season also deals with human sacrifices when a mysterious entity starts murdering virgins in Beacon Hills, and nobody knows who is behind it or why it's happening. And the progression of it is really cool. The presence of the Alpha Pack in Beacon Hills starts to mess with nature itself. Stiles starts to realize that animals are acting weird. There's a deer that just ran itself into a car and died. Lydia was suddenly bitten by her dog, which had never happened before. A bunch of birds flew themselves into a window and shattered it, and all of the cats at Scott's veterinarian office killed themselves. Like, something is really fucked here. The other thing that I will give to Teen Wolf in Season 3 is the effort they begin to put in their visuals. Usually, supernatural teen shows like The Vampire Diaries or things like that, they look very bland and uninteresting. It's all very flat, and they're designed to keep things as simple as possible, but Teen Wolf really goes the extra mile to offer some artistic value to its visuals, and I kind of appreciate that. It doesn't always look great, but when it does, it really looks amazing. There are some shots in this show I genuinely love, and you can feel the effort they put in it. So yeah, overall, Season 3A was a major step up, and it actually serves as a transition season that elevates almost every single character in the show. However, Season 3B is where Teen Wolf officially goes from fine to genuinely great. Because yeah, in all honesty, Season 3B is great. Not okay, not good, great. It's kind of crazy how sharply the show leveled up in 3B. This season had no business being as good as it was. I think everybody agrees that that's where they perfected the formula. The first thing I like about Season 3B is that the problem of the season is caused by what the heroes had to do to fix the problem of 3A. They had to reopen the Nematon, the magical tree that is like a supernatural source of dark power, in order to save the day. They made a decision knowing that it would bring more darkness, but they had to do it to save lives, and Season 3B is essentially the consequences of that decision finally catching up to them. I love shit like that. I'm not against a happy ending, but sometimes it's kind of boring when the heroes just save the day and everything is sunny and beautiful. But this season of Teen Wolf was like, nah, the heroes saved the day, and they saved all of the people they wanted to save, but it came at a cost, and they know it's coming. 3B is the most fascinating season because it is quite literally a different genre. It still has the elements that people are used to, like the romance, the action, all that stuff, but at its core, Season 3B is no longer a supernatural teen romance with action. No, it's a straight up psychological thriller. And what makes it stand out even more is that the main character of 3B is not Scott. It's Stiles. You see, Stiles is affected by the Nematon in a way that is literally breaking his mind. The more time passes, the more he struggles to differentiate between dreams and reality, and the way it's written is so fucking good because it makes the audience doubt him. You get to a point where every scene that has Stiles in it, you can't tell if what you're watching is actually real, and neither can he. Sometimes Stiles will have a full 3-minute scene where he's just going to school and having a conversation with Scott, and it's all very normal, but then it'll turn out the whole scene was a dream, and it's a total mindfuck. But it gets even worse. Stiles can't read anymore. Letters transform into weird symbols, or he's gonna try to read a book and he's going to see the words collapse out of the page. And it breaks his perception of reality even more, because you can't read in dreams, so when it happens, he's no longer certain that he's actually awake. Like, my guy is more broken than the ice cream machine at your local McDonald's. He is not okay. And And he's not the only one. Scott is beginning to have hallucinations where he sees the worst possible version of himself. A Scott who has become more of a beast than a man, and it torments him mentally to the point where he's losing control of his powers. He can't transform anymore, or the opposite, he starts transforming out of nowhere and he can't stop it. And Allison starts to have visions of her dead aunt. She's also losing track of time and space. She will be at home, then have a horrifying vision, and then she snaps out of it and she's at school, and she has no idea how she got there or when. And next to all of that, Season 3B also sees the arrival of Kira Yukimura, one of my favorite characters in this show, but we'll talk about her more in a minute. And the show is not fucking around this time. The tone is much darker. It's the season that has the least amount of humor. And when I say that they turned Teen Wolf into a horror show in 3B, you need to know that I am not kidding. Teen Wolf lightly dabbled into horror in previous seasons, but it was kinda cheap and lame. But 3B has some scenes and shots that genuinely freak me out. And the anxiety factor of the season really works. You can feel the walls closing around the characters as they run out of options, because they're in a situation where they can't even trust themselves. They can't rely on their intuition or their powers, and it just makes everything worse. And of course, you can't talk about 3B without talking about the villain. Season 3B sees our heroes facing their worst fears when they go against a terrifying dark entity known as a Nogitsune. And this thing really marked me as a fantastic horror villain.
Who's that? Who are you?
Not who are you, Stiles? Who are we?
This thing is fucking terrifying. The concept behind what it is fucking terrifying. Even how he looks, he's all gross and creepy. His body is dislocating as he's walking. Like, it's fucking weird. I love it. Basically, a Nogitsune is a trickster spirit, an evil entity that feeds on chaos, strife, and pain. This thing does not have a goal aside from causing as much horror as it possibly can for no reason. So for Scott and his pack, that's a challenge because they always try to connect with their enemies in hopes of turning them good. They always offer compassion to their enemies, but now they're facing an entity that by its very own nature cannot be reasoned with. It doesn't have a purpose or a code or a way to do things. It's the incarnation of chaos. It's like the Joker. It just wants to watch the world burn, just because. It wants to torture people just because. And when I say torture, I mean both physically and mentally. You see, the best part of Season 3B, which also tends to be the most popular aspect of Teen Wolf as a whole, is the fact that in the second half of that story, the Nogitsune spirit takes possession and duplicates the body of Stiles, essentially giving us a ruthless, cruel, and terrifying villain played by Dylan O'Brien himself. And he is absolutely brilliant in this role.
It's louder than usual, isn't it? Well, that's because a lot of bad things happen down here. Oh, you really have to learn, Scott. You really have to learn not to trust the fox. No, because they're tricksters. They'll fool you. Divine move. Divine move. You think you have any moves at all? You can kill the Oni, but me? I'm 1,000 years old. You can't kill me! Doing that with Stiles was a genius move because Stiles is usually the comic relief character. He's the funny guy, but he's not being funny this season. I can probably count the amount of jokes he has on one hand, and it really helps shifting the tone to a darker one. There's also a storyline involved that includes a riddle that Stiles can't manage to solve, and
God, this season is so fucking good. Dylan O'Brien really got to shine in that season, and he got to flex his incredible acting abilities beyond his innate talent for comedy, and I think it's safe to say that everybody was impressed. He did such a good job at playing the psychotic aspect of the Nogitsune. He was actually threatening and intense, and the character was always one step ahead, which made him even more scary. The Nogitsune, who is often referred to as Void Stiles, really gets a kick out of breaking people through fear. That's kind of his signature move. He actually won't just kill you, he will make sure that when he's ready to kill you, you are at the most terrified you possibly can be. It's kind of like Pennywise from It. I think there's no way around it. Void Stiles is easily the best character in the show. Not just the best villain, the best character, period. And the most interesting part of the Nogitsune is its backstory, which is where Kira comes in. Kira is a new student in Beacon Hills who develops a romance with Scott. She's like this shy, socially awkward girl who struggles to make friends, but that's not it. Eventually, we find out that Kira is a kitsune, a fox spirit with immense power. She even learns during the season that while her father is a regular human, her mother Noshiko is also a kitsune. And not just any kitsune. Kira finds out that her mother is actually 900 years old, and she is the reason the Nogitsune is terrorizing Beacon Hills. You see, back in 1943, during World War II, Noshiko fell in love with a soldier in Beacon Hills. However, her boyfriend got killed in a violent massacre that left tons of people dead. Angry and seeking revenge, Noshiko did the unthinkable and decided to summon a Nogitsune, hoping that it would possess her body and drive her revenge with as much blood as humanly possible. However, things did not turn out that way. The Nogitsune instead possessed the body of her dead lover and went on a rampage that killed tons of innocent people. So Noshiko, who was horrified by what she did, teamed up with a werewolf to defeat the Nogitsune, but they were unable to kill it, so they had to find an alternative and decided to trap it inside of the Nemeton, the big supernatural power source hidden in Beacon Hills, where it remained trapped for decades until the finale of Season 3A, when Scott, Stiles, and Allison had to make the decision to reopen the Nemeton to beat the Darok and Deucalion, which caused the Nogitsune to be free. Now Kira, like her mother, is a kitsune. She is the balanced being. See, a big theme that's often repeated in Teen Wolf is the concept of nature needing to balance things out. If a creature appears that is so powerful that it puts nature out of balance, nature will create an equally powerful being of opposite force to re-establish the balance. In the case of the Nogitsune, we have Kira. She's the equal. She's nature's response to the Nogitsune. Kira is a great character that was an amazing addition to the cast, but she was so brutally mistreated by the writers, and more specifically Arden Cho, who plays her. If you don't know the story, Kira was written out of the show at the end of Season 5 out of nowhere, and it was revealed soon after that not only the audience was blindsided by her sudden departure, but Arden Cho herself was as well. She ended up releasing a YouTube video to confirm to fans of the show that she would not be coming back, but explained that she didn't really know why.
A lot of you guys have been asking about Teen Wolf and what's happening, and I just want to say I love Kira Yukimura so much. I love the Yukimura family, but unfortunately it looks like we are wrapped up with Kira's storyline and she won't be coming back for Season 6. But yeah, sorry that there were some interviews where I said I was excited for Season 6, because I think at the time we were assuming that we were back. And I think sometimes in a show where there's so many characters, there isn't always room for everyone and everyone's storylines, and so I guess that was it. I do wish we would have developed a little bit more of her powers and the skinwalkers, and just there would have been more of like an epic ending, but you never know with Teen Wolf. I mean, people might come back. It is what it is.
She actually finished shooting Season 5 expecting to be coming back for Season 6. Her character was sent on a journey that teased her return with newfound abilities. But then she just never returned, and so her story ends very abruptly and in a way that's not very satisfying. It's a real shame because she was the character with the most interesting mythology to explore. The Kitsune mythos was actually really intriguing, and they could have explored that way more. She was one of the best characters on the show, and her story never really gets a proper end. But at least Season 3 gave her a solid entry point, because she was a really cool character to have around during this whole Void Stiles massacre. Oh, and also Derek is in this season. I don't know why, but he's there, whatever. There are some things about season 3 that I don't like. Scott's dad is a character that just doesn't work and does not need to be here. He just kind of slows down the story and it never really leads to anything. The season also introduces the character of Malia Tate, who I am not a big fan of. It's a character that, despite a good concept, is just terribly executed. She's not awful, she's fine, but I don't know, she just doesn't work for me. And I love Shelley Henning, and she's fine in the role, but Malia as a character is just kind of boring. And then they reveal out of nowhere that her biological father is Peter Hale, and it never has a point, it's just there for the sake of having a twist, and everything about Malia is just a wasted opportunity. I could not care about this character less. I will say that the one big problem I have with season 3 is that this is the point where the writers decided to abandon any sort of consistency when it comes to the mythology of the show. Season 3 is where the rules of the world of Teen Wolf start being way too convoluted for no reason. There's no fun in trying to figure out how the heroes will outsmart the villains by beating them at their own game, because the writers will often just make shit up to write themselves out of corners, and the resolution to a lot of issues always boil down to some ancient thing that comes out of nowhere at the last minute, and that just happens to be the perfect solution to the problem they currently have. It's kind of lame, and unfortunately it's a problem that only gets worse as the show goes on. Oh no, someone has amnesia, and their memories contain very important information about the villains. Well, that's okay, because apparently alpha werewolves have an ancient ritual that allows them to see people's memories for some reason. Oh no, we gotta locate a supernatural being who kidnapped people, but it's impossible to trace them. Well, don't worry, it just so happens that there is an ancient ritual that can transport your spirit to a place that'll give you a clue on where they are. Like, you can tell they're just making shit up as they go, and that the supernatural elements of the show do not have real rules that are set in. It's just bad world building, but everything else in this season is so good that I can let it slide. But just for these 12 episodes. The other ones can go fuck themselves. Oh, also, I almost forgot to mention, Allison dies this season. She gets killed by the Nogitsune. I remembered finding it really anticlimactic back then, and it just came back to me that the reason why was because MTV and the people behind the show decided to use her death as a marketing strategy for the season. Everyone kept talking about the big death. They told everyone a main character was going to die this season. It was even in the trailers. And like, that's so lame, man. A death scene like this should be impactful and shocking. Why would you announce it's coming ahead of time? That's so stupid. Like, imagine if the trailer of Avengers Endgame was like, some of the original 6 Avengers will die. Well, then you'd just be in the theater and you'd watch Natasha and Tony die, and you'd just be like, yeah, okay, well, they did tell us in the trailer. Like, it just wouldn't have the same impact, especially because everybody and their mom figured out it was gonna be Allison, because there had been rumors that Crystal Reed wanted to leave the show. So yeah, Allison dies, and all things considered, the scene itself is actually very emotional and very well done. She dies in Scott's arms after getting stabbed by one of the Oni, and she gives him a final declaration of love because she knows she's going to die, and those are her last words.
I'm in the arms of the first person I've ever loved. The person I'll always love. I love you.
Which is a little funny because her boyfriend is standing like right next to them the whole time. Oh, this is Isaac, by the way. He's not important at all. And then the show just kind of moves on. It's not a bad scene, but it's just not very impactful. It doesn't have any weight. I barely remember the scene, so like, you know, whatever, it's just not that memorable. Season 3 also starts the trend of resurrecting everyone for no reason. Teen Wolf is a show where nobody really dies, except for Allison, but everybody comes back to life somehow. Peter cheats death like 3,000 times. Kate Argent comes back to life once or twice. Derek's dead sister reappears. Theo is literally sent to hell and he comes back. Gerard dies and comes back. Like, it turns into the Vampire Diaries, where death just doesn't mean anything anymore. You can watch people die in horrible ways and you're just like, wow, okay, that was brutal. Well, see you next season. It's also worth noting that season 3 is where the show starts abandoning storylines a lot. For example, the final episode of 3A heavily suggested that Peter Hale would become a main villain again. He kills The Rock after she reveals that his plan was for Scott to become an alpha so he could kill him and become an alpha again. And like, the scene is very dramatic.
I am the Alpha. I've always been the Alpha!
You lost your kite! Have fun flying your string all day!
But then, nothing ever comes of it? I don't even think that's mentioned again. So, why was that scene in there? Peter never really tries to be an alpha again. That was so random. But overall, yeah, season 3B is just too good. It had no fucking right to be this good. It's almost annoying. Those are the only 12 episodes of the show that are truly worth watching, and revisiting it after years was extremely satisfying to me because it holds up. It is just as good as I remembered it being. Like, it's so good. How the hell did they pull this off? Like, was this just accidental genius? I don't understand. You made 6 crappy seasons of TV, and then in the middle of that, you just throw 12 episodes that are fucking masterful, and we just have to act like that's not weird as shit? Anyways, let's get back to the trashy stuff. Seasons 4, 5, and 6. Okay, this is gonna be quick because all things considered, there actually isn't that much to say about these 3 seasons. You'll understand why. Basically, season 3B was just a masterclass that completely redefined the genre in its own right, and that's worth acknowledging, okay? Season 3B is great, I have almost no complaints, it's amazing. But unfortunately, this surprising stroke of genius that was 3B also ended up being the downfall of the show. You see, 3B was just so fucking awesome. It was so freaking good that the rest of the show then miserably tried to recapture that magic, and it failed at it every single time. Every season of Teen Wolf after 3B tried to one-up the darkness and the villain of 3B, and unfortunately, it never quite managed to do so, resulting in a significant decline in quality that made the show almost unwatchable for a number of reasons. The first reason, which I think is one of the ultimate mistakes that a lot of shows like Teen Wolf do, is that Jeff Davis didn't seem to understand that bigger does not necessarily mean better. Every season, he tries to up the ante so much, but it just doesn't have the gravitas because the writing is not as tight and the storyline is just not as interesting. But the main reason why the decline in quality of Teen Wolf was so intense is actually due to one very specific factor. Because Teen Wolf pre-season 3 was actually kinda shitty, but people tend to remember it fondly. While Teen Wolf post-season 3 is also shitty, but people absolutely hate it, me included. Why is that? Well, I think the big difference between those two eras of the show is that pre-season 3 Teen Wolf was more focused on being fun and cheeky, and it was very self-aware, while on the other hand, Teen Wolf post-season 3 is so high on the darkness of 3B that it takes itself way too seriously. And this desire to always make it bigger and darker every season just leads to the show losing itself in an incredibly inconsistent mythology that, by the time the show ends, makes so little sense and is so uselessly convoluted that it becomes difficult to even understand what's happening or why it's happening. This is the point where things really start to change. Season 4 is watchable, it has some good elements in it. It's more of a straight up whodunit murder mystery, a bit like season 1. Basically, a bunch of supernatural beings are turning into assassins and kill people on behalf of a mysterious person known as the Benefactor. And the goal of the season is to neutralize the assassins and figure out who is the Benefactor. There's another storyline with Kate Argent and the Berserkers, but I didn't care about that. and I don't want to talk about it, so I'm gonna skip it. The season itself is kinda good, but it is completely ruined by its ending. The twist of the season is just so lame that despite most of it being good, I can't recommend watching it. The season is also weird when it comes to character writing. Like, Scott is just really dumb in this season. Lydia is completely isolated the entire time. You barely see her interact with anyone. She's on her own. But yeah, it's watchable. Season 4 is decent. Season 5 is where the show gets really bad, and in a way where it's just not fun anymore. First off, this season introduces an army of new characters that are supposed to be the next gen, and I don't like any of them. Okay, except him. He's funny. I like him. Season 5 also has the worst villains. The Dread Doctors, while a good idea in theory, are the fucking worst, and they are so boring. Teen Wolf is a show that really likes its slow motion shots. I'm of the opinion that it uses it a bit too much, but having shots of 3 assholes in weird costumes walking to scary music in slow-mo every other scene is just not threatening. And unfortunately for them, they don't really do anything else. The Chimera storyline is alright, but the whole story about the Beast of Gévaudan is just terrible, and Parrish and his fucking powers are just so fucking lame. I hate it. I hate Parrish. I hope he dies. And that's another problem. By season 5, almost every character in the show has become a supernatural being, and nothing feels special anymore. Season 5 is also the season where the writers decided to break up the band. Jeff Davis wanted everyone in the pack to be separated this season, so the writers really had to stretch the logic of certain characters in order to milk drama out of it, and everybody is acting out of character the whole season. And I don't know, it's weird. I don't like this season. But nothing in Teen Wolf, nothing, and I mean nothing, gets worse than season 6. Holy shit, I can't even begin to explain how much I hate this season of television. It is such a frustration to me. Season 6 is the final season of the show, and like season 3 and 5, it was split into 2 parts, this time of 10 episodes each. Season 6A was actually fine-ish. It deals with a bunch of beings known as Ghost Riders who actually look creepy as shit. The Ghost Riders ride into a town and kidnap people to bring them to their own dimension, but as soon as they do, the victim is erased from the existence of their original dimension, meaning nobody remembers them. Every trace of their existence disappears. Photos, belongings, memories, it's all gone. It's like they never existed. It's honestly a really cool concept. I actually like that a lot. And the Ghost Riders were mostly created because season 6 was also very different due to the departure of Dylan O'Brien, who was shooting the 3rd installment of Maze Runner during production of season 6. So the writers had to come up with an excuse for Stiles being gone, and so the season starts with Stiles becoming a victim of the Ghost Riders. He disappears, and the next day, nobody remembers him. But then Lydia realizes something in their daily lives doesn't quite add up, and because she's a banshee and the writers just keep making up new powers for her, she can sort of breach through dimensions now, and she starts to realize that someone who was in their life is no longer there, and she can't quite understand why. It's solid. The season is dragged down by 2.0, the secondary cast of younger characters that takes way too much space in the fucking show. I'm sorry, I don't give a shit about Liam and his girlfriend. I don't care about Parrish and his weak ass. I don't give a shit about Theo. They're all boring. I don't care. But the main plot of season 6A is sort of intriguing. I'll give it a pass. What I do not give a pass to, though, is season 6B, which is one of the most insulting seasons of TV ever made, and the way they decided to go about it is just unforgivable. 6B is essentially the 10 final episodes of Teen Wolf, and out of all the seasons I just broke down, it is the one with the worst premise. If you've been paying attention, you'll notice that so far I have liked the premise and concept of every season of the show, regardless of how good or bad the execution was. But you immediately know 6B was going to suck because the very idea of it is fucking fucking lame. There was no way to execute it well. Now, here's the main reason why the premise doesn't work and why it pisses me off so much. Season 6B was used as a setup season for a potential spin-off show that ended up never happening. Now, why do I have such a problem with that? Well, let me explain. The plot of 6B is that people at Scott's old high school have figured out that supernatural beings exist and they start going after them. Now, there's a guidance counselor named Monroe who was attacked by the Beast of Gévaudan in the last season, but she survived and now she wants to hunt down and kill every supernatural being in existence. And she starts publicly outing werewolves and shit. She also teams up with Gerard, who comes back out of nowhere, and together they create an army of hunters to destroy Scott's pack along with every other supernatural in Beacon Hills. Basically, the concept of the season is that Scott now has to fight against an entire town that is after him. Now, that's already pretty meh as a premise, but you remember what I said about 6B being a setup for a dead spin-off project? Yeah. Hold on, it's about to get real stupid. You see, since the writers expected to make a spin-off with other characters, they decided to use Season 6B to set up an antagonist to carry over. In other words, Monroe, the main villain of 6B, is not actually a villain made for Teen Wolf. She was created for the spin-off. And this was just like her origin story. You get where I'm going with this, right? The problem with 6B that pisses me off so much is that Teen Wolf ends its final season with an undefeated villain. Literally, the final villain of the show just escapes. She just slips away at the end of the finale and there is no resolution to that storyline. There's no finality. She just kind of lost that round and she fucked up. There's even a flash forward at the end where Scott finds a werewolf called Alec who tells him Monroe promised to kill him, so she's still around. The show ends up teasing the return of a villain they never defeated. I hate it. I hate it so fucking much. Season 6B is such a frustrating experience. I wish the show had ended in 6A. It was so unnecessary and weird and not fun because this show takes itself so fucking seriously and it tries to be so fucking dark and it just sucks. Fuck Season 6B. I'm done talking about this shit because I'm gonna fucking throw someone off a bridge. I'll be right back, I need a Kit Kat. Overall, Teen Wolf is a show that's just kind of a mixed bag. There's a lot of good stuff in it that I actually like, but there's an equal amount of atrocious bullshit to balance it out, you know? This show really managed to survive thanks to its characters. And for good reason, the characters are all well fleshed out, at least when it comes to the main pack. It's still funny to think of them as 16-year-olds. Even as a teenager, I couldn't buy these characters as teenagers. And I mean, come on, can you blame me? Crystal Reed was already 27 years old when she started playing Allison. Arden Cho was 30 when she played Kira. And it gets funnier than that. To give you an idea, Crystal Reed and Arden Cho are both older than Haley Webb, who played their teacher in season 3. Like, what the hell? But yeah, I really like most of the characters in Teen Wolf, and I also love how they evolve for the most part. A lot of people have been sending me messages about flaws these characters have because they want me to call them out, but no. I can't say that about a lot of teen shows, but the characters in Teen Wolf have flaws that are mostly intentional on the writer's part. Like, people who ask me to shit on Scott for mistakes he has made or for being selfish in early seasons, I think you're kind of missing the point. Like, a lot. In season 1, Scott is just a whiny little guy that I remembered finding really annoying. He refuses to ever take matters into his own hands. He often abandons his friends in life or death situations because he wants to hang out with his girlfriend. Like, he's a dick. Yeah, but rewatching this as an adult, I realized that this was completely intentional. He's supposed to be a dick. That's the point. And it actually made me feel a little bad for him because, like, he gets superpowers against his wishes. He does not want them, and he suddenly becomes the target of an army of different people who all want him dead or alive for different reasons. But the show constantly reminds you that at the end of the day, despite being a werewolf, Scott is just a kid. He's like 15 or 16 and he has no fucking idea what he's doing, and he makes bad decisions all the time. The show decides to give him a lot of time time to step into his role as a leader. He goes through a real progression, and while it's not always perfect, because yeah, at times the writers do make Scott act like an insensitive asshole just for the sake of drama, like in season 5, Scott overall goes through a fairly compelling hero journey. And the reason why it works is also that in season 1, Scott doesn't give a flying fuck about being a leader or a hero. His entire motivation through the whole season is to cure himself from being a werewolf. He wants to revert back to being human so he can be with Allison without having to be caught up in a war with her family. He wants to find the Alpha because Derek told him there's a chance you can become human again if you kill the one who bit you. This isn't about saving the world for Scott, it's about saving himself. And by the way, we never really get a confirmation about the cure. The show never says if it's true or not, and after season 1, it's never mentioned again. It's not until season 2 that Scott decides to use his powers for the greater good, because that's when he finally accepts he is a werewolf and will forever be one. And what I like about Scott is that he really works on his moral compass constantly, and he has a drive that makes people look up to him. I mean, Derek tried to make Scott his beta for a very long time, and he found out the hard way that Scott might be young, he may not be the most experienced, but he is not somebody you can just dominate. It's never gonna happen. And in Scott as a character, it creates an element that I absolutely love. He earns people's respect. He inspires esteem and loyalty. There's some genuinely good ideas with his character, despite the clumsy execution most of the time. Because don't get me wrong, Scott is a character that is pretty hit or miss, but when he works, he really works as a protagonist. I like that Scott doesn't just punch his enemies into oblivion to close out a storyline and win the fight. Instead, he actually tries to make them see his perspective and puts a lot of effort into showing them why their way of doing things is faulty, even after defeating them. He shows them that you don't have to do things a certain way just because you were told by other people that's how things are supposed to be. He chooses to see the best in people, and in these values throughout the show, Scott ends up turning his most dangerous enemies into his closest friends and strongest allies. However, like I said, he is not perfect. Scott is a flawed character, and that's why I like him so much. His biggest flaw as a character is that he's very binary. He sees the world as very black and white. He has a hard time with gray areas. To him, you're either a good guy or a bad guy, and sometimes his inability to find an understanding that's somewhere in the middle is what makes him fail as a leader. The best example of that is in season 5, when Stiles is hunted by a supernatural being and ends up killing him in self-defense. Scott is so incapable of discerning the gray area of that situation that he ends up being angry at Stiles for killing someone, even if Stiles was stuck in an unfair fight that was clearly going to result in his death. Stiles is not a supernatural being. He doesn't have any way to truly defend himself against werewolves or chimeras or whatever. He had to do everything he could to survive this, and he ended up killing his aggressor by accident, but Scott can't get past that. The way he sees it is that Stiles took a life, and therefore he is bad and he needs to stay away. Now, I'll mostly attribute that to the bad writing of season 5 because they just really wanted the main characters to be separated, but I do think it shows that Scott's righteousness can be flawed, and I'm okay with that because, like I said, he's always re-evaluating his morals. But for example, I can't really say the same for Allison. Now, Allison is a character that I actually like a lot, and I think I'm not alone in this. She's very easy to like, but surprisingly, there isn't that much to say about her. The one thing that I find bizarre with Allison in retrospect, especially when it comes to her moral compass, is how easy it becomes for her to hurt people. Let me explain. When you meet Allison in the show, she is represented as the epitome of innocence. She would never hurt a fly. She's super sweet. She doesn't know anything about this supernatural world. But the second she learns about werewolves and shit, it's like she flips a switch and out of nowhere, she's fucking John Wick. In a matter of minutes, Allison has no problem killing people. She actually shoots Derek twice with the intent to kill. There's also an episode in season 2 where she shoots a cop in the leg and doesn't even flinch. Like, she never questions the fact that she's hurting people. There's never an internal debate about that. It's a really weird turn that is very out of character for her. It made more sense in season 2 because the point of her storyline is that she was being brainwashed by the hunters, but in season 1 it's just jarring. However, where Allison works as a character is in her affection and heart. She's a loving person and she prioritizes the happiness of everyone around her. There's this scene in season 3 that I really like where Scott shows up at a rave with Kira and they're holding hands, and then from a distance, Scott locks eyes with Allison, who sees him with another girl for the first time since they broke up. They stare at each other for a moment and Allison clearly looks surprised. Kira notices the look and nervously lets go of Scott's hand, but then Allison smiles at Scott and gives him a nod just to let him know it's okay. It's a quick sequence, but I like it a lot because it says everything you need to know about Allison and Scott's relationship. The scene is not over dramatized. It doesn't do the typical teen drama thing of overblowing this into an argument full of petty jealousy. No, it's fast and there isn't a single word exchange in this scene. The whole interaction is done by exchanging looks. I don't know, there's just something about Allison that's very wholesome. Even if there isn't that much to say about her as a character, I just like her. Stiles is easily the best character in the entire show, without counting the Nogitsune. And honestly, he's probably the main thing that makes the show worth watching. And you can really tell because in season 6, you feel his absence. This show just falls apart if he's not in it. He's just too good. This character is what we can refer to as lightning in a bottle. What Dylan O'Brien did with Stiles can never be equaled or remade. He's a legendary character. I don't have anything else to say. Now, I'm gonna say something that's going to piss some people off, but I think it's necessary. Lydia is not that great of a character. Okay, I know. Don't yell at me, okay? Because, listen, I will say that I still like her. Sort of. See, Lydia in season 1 is absolutely awful. She's the worst, and don't fight me on this. I don't care. You can't change my mind. Her character is only here to be the one-dimensional mean girl, and most of her dialogue is essentially the writers having fun with not-so-subtle sexual innuendos.
Jackson's gonna play tomorrow, but he's not gonna be at his peak. And I prefer my boyfriend at peak performance.
This right there is 90% of Lydia's role in season 1. That's all she ever does, and I can't stand her. However, season 2 kind of fixes Lydia. They don't flat out transform the character, but they do give her enough nuance to elevate what she already was. Lydia is still the mean girl and shit, but season 2 kind of shows what hides behind that. The show mainly reveals that Lydia is actually hyper intelligent. She's actually very likely to always be the smartest person in the room, but it's often overshadowed by the fact that she's rude and superficial and full of herself, and people just don't like her because she's mean. The reveal of Lydia being a supernatural being is very well done. She gets bitten by the alpha at the end of season 1, and when an alpha bites you, you either die or you turn into a werewolf. However, Lydia survives the bite, but she also does not turn into a werewolf, and nobody understands how that's possible. And the big question becomes, well, if she's not a werewolf, and she's clearly not human because she didn't die from the bite, then what is she? Well, in season 2, Lydia starts to have strange visions that hint at the fact that she may not be entirely human. And soon after, we learn that she is a banshee. Long story short, Lydia is a bit of a psychic, and she has a supernatural scream that happens most of the time without her control. The scream is a sort of supernatural warning. More specifically, the scream of a banshee signals that somebody is about to die. Her psychic abilities manifest in the form of visions that make her space out. What I like about it is that her visions are not always clear, and she needs to interpret those visions to understand their meaning, but she doesn't always get it right. Sometimes she's wrong about the meaning of her vision, and that can actually endanger people. I also do like her long arc where she tries to understand how her powers work so she can control them, because being a banshee is dark as hell and really overwhelming if you don't have control over it. Lydia is essentially a supernatural compass that finds impending doom. She finds dead bodies out of nowhere, she can feel when someone is about to die, her powers manifest in weird ways, and she can't figure out what triggers her visions. In all that sense, I think Lydia is a very cool character, but a lot of people like her because of the ship with Stiles, and alright, let's talk about that. A lot of people are really into the relationship between Lydia and Stiles, and I completely disagree. Now, if you know me, you know that I do not care about ships in TV shows. I don't don't have opinions on them aside from the fact that most of the time they're completely unnecessary to the story and they can actually slow down the plot to a point that makes the show nearly unwatchable. Arrow. But this is a rare exception where I do have a very strong opinion about a ship, because I do not get the appeal for these two, and I don't know why people find them cute. It's only when rewatching the show that I realized that Lydia is like weirdly abusive to Stiles, almost constantly. She kinda treats him like shit. She barely even respects him. Most of their relationship is Stiles showing support and interest towards Lydia, and Lydia just freely insulting Stiles and calling him names for no other reasons that she feels like it. She mostly goes to him when she needs something from him, and the only moments where she shows any sort of genuine affection towards him is in life or death situations that are not ordinary. Other than that, she never even seems like she enjoys being around him. She's more annoyed by his presence than anything else most of the time, and she systematically picks other guys over him. They do have chemistry, I'm not gonna lie, and both have a charisma that makes their scenes together entertaining, but the fact that this relationship is so beloved makes no sense to me, especially because I'm pretty sure that if it had been the other way around and Stiles had been the one treating Lydia like shit 95% of the time and picking other girls over her, nobody would fuck with that, and Stiles would probably be hated for it. Them finally getting together felt like fan service. It feels forced and it doesn't make sense. I think it would have been better if they formed a platonic friendship rather than a romantic relationship. Even Stiles' infatuation with Lydia is purely a sexual fantasy. Most of the time you see him drooling over her in early seasons, he doesn't actually know anything about her. He just thinks she's hot. And I think my boy Stiles deserves to be with someone who treats him right and doesn't see him as a disposable last option. I know they're hot and shippers just live to watch hot people make out and stuff, and that's cool, I don't have anything against that, whatever. But yeah, these two just don't make sense as a couple, and you can't change my mind about that either. Also, side note, am I the only one who finds it kind of weird that Lydia is straight up simping for 14-year-olds? I mean, the show does acknowledge how weird it is that she's into boys, but it still weirds me out.
Freshmen, tons and tons of fresh men.
You mean fresh boys? Lydia, they're 14. Some more mature than others.
Anyways, Lydia starts to be completely ruined as a character in season 5. First of all, the destruction of the mythology kind of fuck up her Banshee stuff, and the writers just completely lost their minds with her. Now she can use her Banshee scream as a weapon, like she can blast people with it. Basically, Lydia turns into Black Canary, and not only that, but in season 5, she's suddenly like, I know Kung Fu, and she bodies people like it's nothing. It's super weird. I really hate what they did to her character in the last couple of seasons. What the hell did you smoke after 3B, man? I guess I should also talk about Jackson. I really don't want to, though. Long story short, Jackson is a pest that has to level with Scott. In other words, Jackson is the Draco Malfoy to Scott's Harry Potter. He's his rival, but never a full-fledged villain. At least until he becomes the Kanema, but even then, he doesn't really know what he's doing. He's not aware of what he's doing, so that doesn't really count. Jackson kind of sucks as a character. A lot. And fans used to love him, and upon rewatch, I realized the only reason fans love Jackson so damn much is because Colton Haynes is really good looking. And the main reason why Jackson doesn't work as a character is that his motivations throughout the entire show never quite make sense. From the very start of the first episode, it's immediately established that he doesn't like Scott, but there's never a clear reason why. He just doesn't like him. And I can already see you telling me that it's because he's suspicious of Scott's abilities on the lacrosse field, blah blah blah, and that's true, but he already was a dick to Scott before Scott even became a werewolf, so that argument doesn't work. Furthermore, once Jackson finally finds out about supernatural creatures like werewolves and whatnot, his main goal is that he wants to become a werewolf. But again, there's never a reason why. At first it seems like he's doing it because he wants to be good at lacrosse, which is fucking hilarious. But the more it goes, the more his reasons just disappear, and his entire role in the story is just being angry all the time, but to an excessive extent. It's not just his personality. Being angry is the only emotion he has as a character, and it is so boring. Jackson just never feels like he belongs in this story. He's just there most of the time, and then he leaves at the end of season 2, and the show is better for it. Derek is kind of the same, mainly because he hardly has a reason to exist in this show after season 1 or maybe season 2. In the first 2 seasons, Derek is not really a hero or a villain. He's kind of in the middle. Whatever he does is to serve his own interests, so if he needs to help the good guys to do it, he will. If he has to pander to the bad guys to do it, he will. It makes for interesting sequences because you never really know what his angle is going to be, but the writers don't always do it great. One thing that's funny though is how creepy he is. Derek is an adult, but he spends the first 2 seasons constantly sneaking into the high school to interact with teenagers. Or you just get those shots of him staring at teenagers from a distance like a creep. Bro, get a hobby. And I adore Tyler Hoechlin. I'm a huge fan of this guy. And just as an actor, I'm happy to see him get more and more recognition because he's truly amazing. But I understand why he ended up leaving the show, because after season 2, Derek just doesn't have much to do. The most wasted opportunity with this character is just how underused certain of his dynamics with characters can be. One of the best duos in the entire show is Derek having to work with Stiles. Whenever these two are together, it's always funny, but it doesn't happen too often.
Come on, get it out there. Don't be scared. Big bad wolf? Yeah, look at that. Okay, see this? That's maybe 3 inches of room to gather enough force to punch through solid
Usually, Derek only gets to interact with Scott, and that's kind of it. Other than that, Teen Wolf was criticized for its extremely gratuitous over-sexualization of male characters, especially for characters that are supposed to be like 14 or 16 years old, and it's hard to disagree. It's a little intense, and Derek is a great example of that. After season 2, he mostly exists in this show to be shirtless, and that also becomes the case for an insane amount of characters moving forward. Those are the only characters that are worth talking about. The cast of 2.0 is fine. I don't really have an opinion on them. I just think they take too much space, but half of the original cast was gone when they started running shit, so I get why they had to do that. But yeah, honestly, I gotta say I'm pleasantly surprised. I was expecting my re-exploration of the show to be a bit of a drag, but against all odds, I actually had a lot of fun rewatching Teen Wolf. Except for the last season, which is unbelievably bad. The show is flawed, but it's a fun ride. These characters are attaching and memorable. They have distinct personalities that don't feel like cardboard cutouts of bad cliches, or at least not after the first season. It's a show that really tried to leave its mark. It put a lot of effort to hit different, and it did hit different. And while most of the show is rough and unintentionally funny, season 3B will go down in history as probably the best season in any supernatural teen show. These 12 episodes are a fucking ride, man. I love it. Now, like I said at the very beginning of this video, there is a Teen Wolf movie in the works, and I hope this movie doesn't try to continue the story of season 6 that was left open, because it sucked. And I also hope it will do right by characters that have been wrong. At the time of recording this video, only Tyler Posey has been confirmed to be coming back as Scott McCall, but I am praying that everybody comes back, especially Arden Cho as Kira, who deserves a real ending. This is your shot. Don't fuck it up, Jeff. Holland Roden is living in a van now, I think, so I guess, I don't know, is she busy? What do you even do in a van? Like, what's the vibe? Anyways, I really hope she comes back. Tyler Hoechlin is Superman now, so I don't know if he'll appear. And Dylan O'Brien is way too busy being in Taylor Swift's overly dragged out music videos about Jake Gyllenhaal. I don't care what you say, that video was too long and I was bored. Great acting though. But honestly, at this point, I don't know how you make a Teen Wolf movie without Stiles. That's not conceivable in my head. He has to come back. But yeah, I really hope this movie is gonna be more like 3B, even though I'm not sure they'll ever be able to recapture that. I don't know, we'll see. But one thing is absolutely sure, Teen Wolf was an extremely bizarre adventure, and I cannot wait to see where it goes from there.
How about this? Either you cut off my arm, or I'm gonna cut off your head.
Okay, you know, I'm so not buying your threats anymore. Oh my god, okay. All right, boss, sold, totally, I'll do it.